listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollak. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation? Welcome into our Week 3 preview show. Joe, Jeff, is it Week 3 or is it Week 10? With all these quarterback injuries, it feels like late in the season.
It feels like we've had 3 seasons at least worth of quarterback injuries and replacements already.
Easily.
Yeah, I mean, it could be recency bias, but I feel like I haven't seen this many quarterback injuries in a year in a while, let alone the first couple weeks.
Yeah, it's nuts. Like, quarterback is the most reliable position for football. They almost never get hurt, and we've lost between the injuries and the replacements, we're at 5 now?
Something like that. That sounds about right. Well, I know we're going to get into it more later, so yeah.
It's crazy. 3 weeks into the season, we've already had a game dubbed on Twitter the Body Bag Part 2. Like the Eagles game last week, they were calling it the Body Bag Part 2 game, and I was like, that's so sad. All right, guys. Well, we got a lot to do on this show. We got our news and notes, injury roundup, our cheat dates for Week 3, and our what to watch fors. Jeff, Joe, y'all ready to jump into it?
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah, man.
All right, some news and notes.
News and notes from across the NFL.
First up, not really fantasy relevant, but kind of interesting. The Cowboys have waived their 2017 first round pick, Taco Charlton. And fun fact, the Cardinals have first waiver priority.
How is it that over and over again, I sit and I watch the draft on TV and they bring the picks in and they go up and they announce them and Roger Goodell says their name and I'm like, that's a terrible pick. He's not going to be on that roster in 2 years. And 99% of the time I'm right. Like, I'm not a talent evaluator for college football. How are these people this bad at evaluating talent?
Well, my understanding here is that Stephen Jones is actually on record saying they never had a first round grade on him to begin with. And they took him with the 28th pick in the first round. So it's not like he was a top 10 pick, but still you expect to hit on your firsts. You know, Taco seems like a guy that doesn't really want to work. He doesn't, he's had plenty of opportunity, and with all the suspensions in Dallas, for him to not emerge as the guy is pretty troubling. I think if I'm a team who's looking at him, I'm not even expending my waiver priority. I'm going to let him clear. And if we want to bring him in for a workout, we're going to buy him up on the cheap.
David Njoku, TJ Watt, Cam Robinson, like the people that went after him could have worked for that team. They could have done things that this team needed. Like, how do you take him right before TJ Watt? TJ Watt has crushed it.
Yeah, well, I think they looked at TJ Watt and they probably realized he wasn't necessarily a scheme fit for what Rod Marinelli wanted to do. I mean, he's definitely a much better fit in Pittsburgh. And I think a lot of that just has to do with what is the coach looking for. And they really needed an extra down defensive end. And that's what they thought they were getting in Taco Charlton. And he just hasn't lived up to the billing, and he hasn't lived up to what he did at Michigan.
This is exactly why you draft based on talent, not based on need. Because they could have traded a player if they didn't need him that actually had some talent, had some work ethic. But just having to cut your first round pick this soon is awful.
Well, I think there's some other malcontent issues going on there. He wasn't happy for something or some reason, and there could be some other things happening in the meeting room. Because, I mean, part of it's probably need, but they also needed a guy, regardless of the grade, that was going to fit their scheme. I mean, if they're looking around and they're saying, oh, well, Cam Robinson, we've got some red flags on him for whatever reason, because he's slipped
Ryan Ramczyk.
Ramczyk, he slipped for a few reasons too. I mean, he should have gone much earlier. And, it's always hard to say, right? Because we're not in the war room and we're not talent evaluators and all this different stuff. And sometimes these guys get paralyzed by all the additional data they have, I think. And maybe they saw something in him and they said, hey, look, we can coach him up based on these 2 or 3 traits. They couldn't. What's wrong with Taco is between the ears. And I think he goes unclaimed. He'll clear waivers tomorrow.
There were some stupid picks in that draft. Garrett Bowles by the Broncos. God, Garrett Bowles over Ryan Ramczyk is an awful, awful pick.
I mean, do you guys call him the human turnstile or like
we should? I don't even know why he's playing. Like, I think that there are replacement level left tackles that are better than what he's done so far. He's a pretty good run blocker, but pass blocking, he just has no clue.
Jeff, to answer your question, we call him the human penalty flag.
Well, that too.
We call him 15 yards.
Well, yeah, isn't he the league leader in holding calls right now?
Oh, yeah.
Since the start of his career, he has the most holding calls in the NFL.
Yeah. He had 4 in one series last week.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've got an idea. I think they ought to just take his hands and tape them up. So he's just got 2 clubs to work with. So he can't really grab anybody.
On
yeah, you can't,
without an injury.
Yeah. Just give him 2 clubs. And he can't grab anybody at that point. He just has to kind of like jab at him.
He would get the nickname Edward 40 Hands after that, and I would enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, not a lot of news in this show. For a bigger news deep dive, check out our Tuesday episode. We went into a lot of stuff on this one, but the last bit of news I have for this show is with Drew Brees out, Sean Payton refuses to name a week 3 starter. This is just interesting. Silly, but interesting. I
don't think it matters because, like, we all knew that Taysom Hill was going to get some work anyway. It's just kind of like how much. Is it 20% of the snaps, 30% of the snaps, 8% of the snaps? Like, I think it depends a lot on whether or not Teddy Bridgewater gets into a rhythm.
Is Sean Payton going to try and Tom Landry us? You know, where he did the Morton and Staubach switch for like every other series?
I think it might. I don't know if it'll be every other series, but I think that they'll both be on the field sometimes too.
I really love that reference. I love the historical jumping back into the 70s. Like, that makes me really, really happy. But it's going to be Teddy B. He's going to go ahead and get the starts. He's going to get a chance to lose this job. They really love Taysom Hill in New Orleans, and I'm with that. But he's not ready for prime time. He's still more of a gadget player. He's definitely not a pure passer. My expectation is that they give it to Bridgewater until he falls on his face, and then they pull in Hill. But Bridgewater's going to have a super short leash.
Sure. I feel like Taysom Hill is Tim Tebow that's accepted that he can't throw the ball.
And that very well could be.
Fair.
I mean, and that very well could be. I just don't even know that that's the case. He might throw it better than Tebow. We haven't seen enough passes and in enough scenarios with live bullets flying to know if any of that's even true.
All right, that'll do it for news and notes. It's time to talk about some injuries, though. Joe?
Injury Roundup.
All right, first let's start out with the players who are definitely out. It's a small list. Deshaun Jackson, he's listed as doubtful with an abdominal strain. Joe, I believe you said the Pro Football Doc said it'd be at least 2 weeks that he'd be sidelined.
Yeah, it said 2 to 4 weeks. I think that it's probably going to fall right in between those if he doesn't experience a setback. I've been following this one pretty closely because I'm heavily invested in Deshaun Jackson. I'm picking him up on waivers if people are dropping him too, even if I don't have an IR spot that I can put him in, because when he comes back, if he gets the kind of target share that he saw in week 1, you could be looking at a guy that you're picking off of waivers that's a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really paying that close of attention to Deshaun Jackson. He looked really great in week 1, but he's not a guy I would be leaning on week to week personally. I think that, in 2-3 weeks when he comes back, he's going to have another, he'll have a big game, and then he's going to have a little game. Then he's going to have a big game. That's has been his career for as long as he's been in the league. I don't think that suddenly that's going to change for him at 31 years old.
My argument against that is just that he's never had Carson Wentz. He's had people that are a below average, below replacement level quarterbacks throwing him the football for his whole career. And Carson Wentz is not that. Carson Wentz, when healthy and 100%, is probably a top 5, top 10 passer in the league.
And I'll grant you that. But the thing is NFL defenses will adjust and they'll decide to pick their poison. And when they go ahead and decide to take away Deshaun Jackson and they want to just go ahead and shade a body over the top of him, it's going to end up being an Alshon Jeffrey week. And then there's going to be a Zach Ertz week. And I think that offense is so good that as defenses try to adjust and maneuver and take a guy away, that's when another one of these guys is going to pop up and have a big day. And I've never seen anything in Deshaun Jackson's history to convince me that he's going to be an every week stud. He's boom and bust. I mean, I love him in best ball. I love him in places where I'm playing to win, so to speak. You're playing for the high point value, but he does have an equally low floor.
My biggest fear with Deshaun Jackson, honestly, is the Carson Wentz thing. Joe said when healthy, Carson Wentz is great, and that's true, but it's the when healthy thing. I mean, in the last game, we had a series or two where we were worried, how hurt is he? He's being looked at on the sidelines, and that feels like something you're going to see a couple times this year. And if Deshaun Jackson comes back in 3 weeks and there is no Carson Wentz, that's even scarier. In the past, you've had Nick Foles as the backup, and you feel semi-confident having your Ertzes and your Jeffries and that with Nick Foles as the backup, but Nate Sudfeld, I'm scared. That's why I have very little ownership of Deshaun Jackson, if any.
To me, it sounds like you guys are saying don't pick up Deshaun Jackson off the waiver wire.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying don't be relying on Deshaun Jackson.
Like if you're looking at Ronald Jones as your 5th running back or Deshaun Jackson sitting there for 2 weeks, which one are you going to take?
Jackson.
Yeah, Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, but that's what I thought. It just sounded like you guys were saying there's no world where you'd pick him up.
No. So I guess I always try to assess value based on, at this point in the season, based on what does my team look like, right? How deep am I at wide receiver? How deep am I at running back? Like if I'm counting a Deshaun Jackson as my number 2 wide receiver, I feel like my team's in trouble.
Sure, but if you're picking him up off the waiver wire, it's more likely he's your 5th or 6th wide receiver.
Sure, and if that's the case, then I'm fine with it because then you're playing. It's an upside play. You're probably plugging him in on a bye week. You're probably playing him on a matchup, and it's all sunshines and rainbows here. But I just want to make sure that as people are running to the waiver wire this week or grabbing guys that might be listed as free agents, post waiver run, how you should be deploying Deshaun Jackson should impact whether or not you pick him up.
I think we're pretty much in the same boat. I just felt like the way that you guys were saying it was a little different because I'm picking up Terry McLaurin if he's still out there well before Deshaun Jackson.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we're going to see way more consistent production out of him.
I feel comfortable right now using McLaurin as a 3, and I'm actually going to do that in one of my leagues this week.
I have him plugged in as my 3 in my main league right now. I was pretty stacked at running back, but
I have one for you real quick. A little coin flip I got McLaurin and John Brown as my options for 3 this week. Who am I going with?
Ooh.
It's tough, isn't it?
I'm going McLaurin. I got a little man crush going on there.
I'm leaning Brown. I don't know why.
I'm going the other way for sure because McLaurin is going up against the Bears on Monday Night Football, and that's the team that just held Devontae Adams, who plays a very similar role in his offense, to 7 points in week 1. They pretty much, like Cortland Sutton, didn't do anything last week. It was all Emmanuel Sanders. So I'm not touching McLaurin this week. I'll probably actually change some of my lineups based on what I just said.
I'm glad I threw that out there for you, Joe. You're welcome.
Thanks, Murph.
All right. And next up for our out list, we have Cam Newton. He was spotted in a walking boot. The news was kind of sudden. I mean, we all saw him looking like he was hurt or something was wrong in the game against the Bucs, but now he's in a walking boot. Now he's confirmed out for at least this week. They say it's kind of indefinite. They don't know how long he will be out. So this is something to definitely keep an eye on if you're a Cam Newton owner.
Yeah, I think this might be a bit of a cover. I'm not totally sure that this is 100% the reason why he's out. I think this could be somewhat in his head, but his mechanics did look terrible. And some of what we saw on film does provide a little credence to what's going on here because he was pulling that back foot through so slowly that his bottom half was completely behind his top half. And I think that's what led to a lot of the issues that he had with his accuracy. So maybe he sits out for 3 weeks, wears the walking boot, and things come back okay. But I don't have a whole lot of faith. I'm dropping him in one of my leagues.
On Monday night, we talked about whether his issues were mechanical or injury based. And I said it might be a little bit of both. One's impacting the other. And that drive leg we were talking about, he wasn't just driving it through slowly, but it would drive outward. He wasn't pulling the foot forward as if to put his body weight through the pass. He was kicking the thing like out toward the sideline. He was getting zero leverage and fully arm throwing, and that's the worst mechanics you can possibly engage in because you're never going to be accurate. And maybe there's something going on with that foot, heel, ankle area where he's having trouble actually just pulling it through and placing it. And that could be why he was swinging it out. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but it makes sense that he's in a walking boot. I don't know that it's all in his head. He's got some things going on up there, but I don't think this particular injury is it.
These memes are brilliant. I want to throw that out there. These memes are fantastic.
The bodyguard one had me rolling. His lower body mechanics look like Jimmy G on a bad throw right now.
I don't know if I agree with that. I watch a lot of Jimmy G, and he does a pretty decent job of pulling his body weight through the pass. The problem that Jimmy's got, though, is that he's got a funky release point, and he has no consistency in his release point. So he'll come through overhead or 3/4, and he'll release the ball either a shade late or a shade early. He's seldom cutting it loose right at the top of the motion. And if he can get consistent around that, he's going to see his accuracy improve, and he's also going to see better zip on some of those outbreaking routes.
I would encourage you to go watch his lower half on some film because he pulls that back foot through so slowly and he drags it around and it's well behind his top half on deep throws. I think that leads to 80% of his accuracy issues on throws downfield.
But on those throws, what's happening around his feet for a guy who's still recovering from an ACL injury?
Oh, I'm talking about well before the ACL injury. He's been doing this since New England.
Well. Pause. Sidebar. Since Jeff joined this show, Joe, you have on the 49ers more than ever. Is this connected? Or are you just trying to make Jeff angry? Or
maybe a little bit, but no, I've always said this about Jimmy Garoppolo. His deep passing issues are 100% because of lower body mechanics.
I think we like the same team. I couldn't deal with this.
Well, the thing is he can't make fun of Joe Flacco anymore, so he just needed to find a new target.
Oh, we can definitely make fun of Joe Flacco still. Don't even kid yourself.
Absolutely still happening.
All right, guys, let's move on to the questionable players of the week. I'm going to run through these real quick and we'll talk about a few of them. As far as quarterbacks, I have Jameis Winston listed here. He did practice in full on Wednesday. He looks good to go. He has a foot injury, so unless he re-aggravates it coming up to the game, he should be good to go against the Giants this week. As far as running backs, we had James Conner, who did not participate. He says he will play, so keep an eye on that. Devin Singletary did not participate with a hamstring. Marlon Mack did not participate with a calf injury. LaShawn McCoy was limited. From what I saw, he didn't practice in the early portion, but he did practice in the later day portion, and he has that knee injury. And Josh Jacobs is limited with a groin injury. Let's stop there for running backs. So James Conner says he's going to play. Do you guys believe him?
Yes, but I don't know how effective he'll be. I think we're going to see more Jalen Samuel than James Conner owners would like.
We're going to see some Benny Snell blended in too. That whole backfield's going to be a mess this week.
Oh, Lord. Marlon Mack. I don't believe in Devin Singletary playing this week. I think he needs a couple more weeks, so let's just jump past him. Marlon Mack. This is kind of a late injury update. I do believe this wasn't known until today. Are you worried this week, or are you still playing him if you have him as your RB2?
I'm pretty worried. If I have a better option, I'm using it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. I'll just be monitoring the situation because he's a guy where he doesn't necessarily need all the reps all week. He's been in this offense for a few years now. He's probably pretty comfortable. And so I don't know if the coaching staff feels the need to push him, when you're talking about calf injuries and things like that. So I'll be watching it pretty closely. And if I have to start him, I will. But if I've got a better option, I'll certainly roll with that guy too.
And of course, lastly, Josh Jacobs. A lot of people have him right now as their RB2. He's been really good over the last 2 weeks. Are y'all worried at all with his groin injury, or is he full go?
I'm a little bit worried. It sounds like there's a hip issue going on too, based on what I read from the Pro Football Doc. They're related to each other. It's not like two separate injuries, but it's a situation you definitely have to monitor. If he's not getting full practices by the end of the week, you might want to go in another direction. That Vikings defense is pretty tough.
Yeah, I'm going in another direction, and some of it's the injury, and some of it is actually just the fact that the Raiders like to go directly up the gut running the ball way too often. When you look at their spreads, when you look at what's off left end, left tackle, left guard, up the middle, right end, right tackle, right guard, that graph is ridiculous. Is up the middle is like almost double the carries of any of the outside zone runs. So I just look at him and I'm like, he's banged up and we're going to slam him up the middle against that Vikings defense. Nah, no thanks. I'm going to go ahead and plant him on the bench and hope I've got a better option in waiting.
All right, moving on to wide receivers. T.Y. Hilton limited with a quad injury. Albert Wilson did not participate with a calf injury. Traquan Smith did not participate with his knee injury that he got in the warm-ups of last week's game. He will need x-rays, so that's something to keep an eye on if you're in deeper leagues. Sterling Shepard limited with a concussion, but being that he was limited, that's a good sign. And Demaryius Thomas did not participate with a knee injury. As far as wide receivers, outside of T.Y. Hilton, most of these guys are deeper owned players, so I feel like we've dodged a bullet.
Yeah, the one position, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, the one position.
Excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and knock on wood real quick.
Traquan Smith was dead anyway when Drew Brees went down, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I did see that Sterling Shepard was still wearing the non-contact red jersey for the entire session, so it's encouraging that he got in a limited session, but it's kind of discouraging that it's taken him this long to get back to any kind of contact.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the Giants are in a rush to bring him back. I think they want to because they've got their kids starting now. But they've got Evan Ingram. I think they've got a bunch of other just warm bodies that are there.
Well, they got Golden Tater.
Well, is he back from suspension?
Nope, get week 4.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I thought it was 2 weeks. Whoops.
Bingo. So, but they still have Saquon, and they're going to hand him the rock a bunch, and they're going to let Daniel Jones throw it to the guys he's been throwing to in practice, who are now all starting because everyone else is hurt or suspended. So this may not be the worst thing if he has to sit another week.
I was talking earlier. I think there's a world where the Millie Maker gets won by Daniel Jones, Benny Fowler, and Evan Ingram all stacked up.
I'm gonna play that stack now just because
I'm playing it for sure. It's so cheap. Like even Evan Ingram's only 5,200 this week. When he's your most expensive player out of your quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, like go for it.
All right, and speaking of tight ends that are questionable this week, Mark Andrews did not participate with a foot. Greg Olsen limited with a back injury. David Njoku has a concussion and a wrist injury now, and Jordan Reed is questionable. So Olsen and Andrews are the two bigger names here that are questionable. Njoku is probably not going to play, and Reed is made of glass. Are you still playing Olsen and Andrews this week, or are you worried and benching them?
Njoku actually broke his wrist, so he did.
Oh, he broke it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Woo.
Mark Andrews, I'm waiting for the later practice reports because he showed up late week last week and then he came out and put up 25 points again. So he's a guy that I'm not really all that worried about at this point, but it's something to keep an eye on. And Greg Olsen was the same way. Greg Olsen played great on Thursday Night Football after being limited with this same back injury. So it's something to monitor. I think Greg Olsen has a fantastic matchup this week too. It would suck if he couldn't get out there.
If either of those guys are held out, if Andrews is out, go grab Hayden Hurst because he's going to have a huge role and he can play. And there's still a good bit of chemistry between he and Jackson. If Olsen's out, go grab Ian Thomas.
Ian Thomas might actually be the better of those plays too, because he's been taking second team reps with the guy who's going to be playing quarterback this week.
Yeah. The only reason I would shy away from Ian Thomas in favor of Hurst is because of the quarterback situation. Yeah, he's been throwing to him in practice, but that Panthers O-line still leaves a little to be desired. And I don't know enough about this guy to feel comfortable plugging him in when I know what I'm getting from Lamar Jackson and I know he's going to get the ball to Hayden Hurst. Both guys in a vacuum, though, I prefer Ian Thomas.
All right, and some last names that we're going to mention, even though they're likely to play. DeAndre Hopkins was limited with a rib injury, but it's DeAndre Hopkins. He doesn't miss for pretty much anything. And Tyrell Williams was limited with a hip injury, but he has stated he intends to play Sunday. With Tyrell Williams, is this more like James Conner, where he says he's going to play, but you're kind of worried about playing him in your lineup?
Yes, because he was limited in the second half of that game against KC. He really came out hot, and then after he left the field and came back in, he did almost nothing.
Yeah, and when he was out, Foster Moreau made an appearance. He went from, I think, 4 snaps in week 1 to like 32 snaps in week 2, and a lot of that was while Williams was out. And he had 4 catches, 40 yards, I think, no scores or anything like that. But Foster Moreau, the tight end, might be a player worth keeping an eye on if Tyrell Williams is out, because Waller gets moved into a wide receiver type position and Foster ends up playing on the line.
All right, that'll do it for the injury roundup. Next up, one of my favorite segments of the week, our cheap dates. We're going to compete against each other head to head. We're going to throw out our streamers and we're going to see which one of us is the winner at the beginning of next week. You guys ready?
Let's do it.
Do it to it.
Cheap dates.
Over the last 2 shows, Jeff, we have made so many references from my childhood movies. We made Little Giants last week, and now you make me feel heavyweights. So thanks. Thanks for that. Do it to it, Lars.
Sorry, man.
It's okay. At least you're choosing good movies from my childhood. All right, so we've got a new format to our cheap dates. Joe, why don't you take a second to explain to our listeners how we're going to be doing this going forward?
We're going to go into cheap dates with a total DFS look. I think that maybe at the end of it, we should mention a few guys that are streamers as we go forward. But generally, I think you know who the streamers are at this point. So we're going to go straight DFS. We're going to judge it not just by points scored, but by how many X you got out of the salary as well. So if you get a lot of points out of a guy that only costs you, $3,500, $3,900 on DraftKings, those are the guys that you really want to target. So those are the guys that we're going to be talking about.
And with that, let's dive in. We've got quarterbacks. Joe, you're up first. Who is your quarterback cheap date this week?
This is risky. This is a tournament play. I wouldn't do it in cash, but I'm actually on board with Mason Rudolph this week. His 4X value is only 19.2 points. So that is a completely achievable number. He had 12.18 points last week, and he only had 19 pass attempts. I think we're going to see more pass attempts than that. I think he's got a whole week to really get in with the ones and gain some chemistry. And look at what San Francisco gave up to Andy Dalton last week, 311-2. I'm not sure if Pittsburgh is going to give up the points on defense to make it such a game script where you need to pass the football, but I could see a couple of long touchdowns to James Washington or, 15 catches by Juju Smith-Schuster for 90 yards. I think that there's a lot of upside in this play, and it leaves a lot of room at 4,800 for you to play basically whoever you want in the rest of your lineup.
All right, I'm up next. I have Jacoby Brissett at Atlanta this week. I used him week 1, and he worked out well for me. Atlanta's got a banged-up secondary. They haven't been playing very well. I think this is a pretty good play. Again, everybody when the season started was like, oh God, the Colts with that Andrew Luck. They're doing all right. They'll be just fine. They're not going to be, an AFC championship contender, but they're still going to put up points. They're going to be good for fantasy. Play your T.Y. Hiltons this week. Play your Eric Ebrons. Play your Jacoby Brissett and feel okay about it. That's all I'm going to say.
The one thing I would say about that is I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of points scored in that game. So it's probably a better cash play than it is a tournament play. Like Jacoby Brissett could go out on fire and put up 4 touchdowns, but I really kind of expect them to try and slow down the clock. Now, if Marlon Mack doesn't play, I think that's a much better play because we're going to see passing game work by Nyheim Hines, and we're going to see a lot more throws in that offense.
You know, hey, I like Jacoby. I mean, I think he's a good player. I think he's a solid quarterback. For 5,200, you know, that's not a bad value there. I mean, the thing I'll be worried about with Atlanta is that they're pretty opportunistic. I don't know if those deep balls to TY are necessarily going to be there. They'll be pretty hit and miss, kind of the way they were against Philly. But yeah, if Marlon Mack is out, I think this is going to be a game script dependent thing where Brissett is just going to be dropping back every single down. And keep your eyes open for my man, Jack Doyle.
All right, Jeff, it is your turn. Who is your cheap date quarterback?
You know, I dogged this guy out on draft day so bad, and I've lived to eat those words, and I do regret it. And I actually feel bad because I watched people boo him at Yankee Stadium. And it was at that point I actually became his fan. Give me Daniel Jones. He's $5,000 on DK. He can move around, underrated ability to kind of move around, get out of the pocket and pick up a few yards. He's not Lamar Jackson, but he can go out and get you a couple on the ground. And he showed really good accuracy, good zip, and good decision-making in the preseason. All I can hope is that some of that carries over now that we're seeing, you know, really schemed up defenses and people are actually trying to stop him now.
I've actually gone back and watched some Duke films since I saw him play in the preseason, and he's not the same quarterback. Like he was always a good decision maker. He's always been a really smart football player. Those were the things he really had going for him. But I didn't see that zip into tight windows on outbreaking routes, like outside the numbers, downfield, 10 to 15 yards. And in the preseason, he was absolutely crushing those routes. Like not just adequate, he was getting the ball out into the window perfectly with amazing zip. I've totally turned around on him. I was just like you. During the draft process, I hated him, but now that I watch him in the preseason, and I kind of got on his side too with the way that fan base treated him, I'm in.
Are you a superstar in New York if you've not been booed by New Yorkers?
No, absolutely not.
I mean, it's a rite of passage. That they were just helping him out on that one.
Well, wait.
Just got it out of the way early.
Has Derek Jeter ever been booed in New York?
I mean, probably at one point or another. Maybe for like a game or something. You never know. It's probably happened.
I don't know. But that's a pretty high
Mets
bar.
fans. Mets fans might have booed him.
Well, we boo everybody because we're so just miserable in our own right that we boo everything. We don't care if it's good, bad, or otherwise. We just boo it all.
You know, I forgot that was your team. I didn't mean to become Joe here and take jabs at you. I apologize.
I'm going to say, it's all right. It's fine. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tighten up my gloves next episode. Don't y'all worry.
Hashtag at least we're not Philly.
Yeah. Well,
all right, let's move into our running backs. Jeff, we're going to put you back up again. Who is your running back this week?
I did this one kind of begrudgingly. I was looking at the whole list of guys under $5,000, and I didn't veer far off that line. I went with Devonta Freeman here. I just feel like he's better than what we're seeing. And I know that line's really beat up, but, you know, Darius Leonard right now, he's dealing with, I think, a concussion right now, actually. I think he's in the protocol. And so when you lose your best tackler effectively on the Colts defense, that could have an impact at the second level there. You know, I don't know that I trust the Colts D-line to really shut down and dominate even the Falcons backups. So there might be a few open holes there and enough volume for him to get you a solid return.
So I got a little something for you on that one. Friend of the show, Chris McConnell of the Roto Bros Fantasy Podcast. Go check him out. Just posted this in the FSA group as we started the show. Through 2 games against running backs, the Colts defense is 26th in yards, 30th in touchdowns, and 32nd in fantasy points. Even says that Devonta Freeman is going to turn the corner. It's in week 3. I like the play.
Yeah, I mean, and I was going there like I just kind of checked out what has the Falcons O-line done? What has the Colts D-line done? And I tried to match them up on paper. And the Falcons kept winning. And that's why I was like, well, okay. I still just, it's still a begrudging move. I don't love it. I don't feel like I'm really excited about it. I'm just kind of doing it anyway.
The other thing that really is encouraging about Devonta Freeman's situation is that in week 1, it was a 50-50 split straight down the middle with Ito Smith. And in week 2, it was a lot closer to 60-40. I think it might even been like 65-35. So it's moving in the right direction. If he gets 70-30 against that defense and the offensive line even plays okay, you've got a really good chance to hit value.
Yeah, I really want to see the Falcons use him the way they did a few years back, where they would just get him out in the open field, hit him with a swing pass, get him out in the flats, and let him just go. But I feel like they just keep trying to slam him between the tackles, and they're not getting him into space or not doing enough of those outside zone run plays. it's just been kind of it's almost like he's miscast in his offense, even though the offense has effectively been the same in the last 4 years. Different coordinators, but it's basically been the same kind of a scheme. But they just, I don't know. I'm not sure what's changed in practice or what they're seeing on film and why they're using him the way they are, but they got to get this guy back in space. Let him use his elusiveness in the open field.
Dirk Cutter got infected by Tampa Bay.
Ugh, it sounds like you need some penicillin.
Yep.
All right, Joe, you are up next. Who is your running back cheap date of the week?
I have got Miles Sanders going this week, and I know he's got less than 3 yards per carry. He's had stacked boxes on the second most snaps of anyone in football at the running back position, but Detroit allowed 25.7 points to DJ in week 1 and 24.3 points to Eckler in week 2. I think that this is a get-right matchup. He's been playing 45% of the snaps. He's seen 38% of the utilization on those snaps. So at 15.6 for 4X, like if he scores a touchdown with the usage he's already been getting, you're almost there. Like you're already hitting 3X if he just does what he's done and scores a touchdown.
I mean, I love Miles Sanders as a player. I think he's great. And yeah, he's gotten kind of an unfair shake. I'd love to see him get more touches though. I feel like he's only had, was it 10 touches each of the last 2 games?
He got 13 opportunities in week 1 and 14 opportunities in week 2. He only converted 1 catch in week 1, but he converted 3. He had 13 touches in week 2. So it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I'd love to see him in that 15 to 17 touch category. And I know that seems a pretty marginal increase, but sometimes a guy like that just needs to get into the rhythm of the game better. And when he's constantly coming in and out with Jordan Howard or Darren Sproles or Murphy or whoever the heck is rotating in for Philadelphia at running back these days.
Let's say I'm not there today. Yeah. I mean, come on, I'm taking a day off.
My big beef is that he's the most talented guy they have, and they've got to at least make an effort at getting him into rhythm and seeing what he's really all about. Because when he gets the ball in his hands, you can tell he's more explosive. He's definitely got a little more zuzu to him. I just want to see them use it.
I think Doug Peterson is a smart coach. Like I bitch and moan about usage for running backs all the time, but I think we're going to see some changes in the way that Miles Sanders is used because they were pretty much just running him up the middle. And he's a guy that you need to get out in space. You need to use him sometimes in the role that you use Darren Sproles in. You need to use Jordan Howard in those run plays right up the middle because he's actually a pretty powerful back. So I think that we're going to see some adjustments as we get into the season, and Miles Sanders can certainly benefit from that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll agree with that. And we looked into the crystal ball back when we did the ratings show for running backs. And I remember kind of like, wiping the schmutz that off the ball that was there and seeing, Miles Sanders taking this job right around week 5, week 6. And so we're not quite there yet, but man, I'm just so impatient for it. I want to see it because I'm really excited about what he brings to the table.
Me too.
All right, I'll finish up the running backs here. My pick this week is Peyton Barber. He's playing the Giants. I know there's a lot of worry around this because everybody's like, well, this week it could be Peyton. Next week it could be Ronald Jones. Honestly, I'm kind of going with Peyton Barber here as the guy for that team this year. Ronald Jones has had some flashes since the preseason, but consistency is a very big problem. He had a week like last week where he got 4 carries, just didn't do much with it. Peyton Barber came in against a Panthers defense that is not, say, as good as they've been in the past, but is still a middle-tier defense. And just did really, really well. I think he's going to get the start this week. I think he's going to get the hot hand this week. And the Giants are just a bad defense. So I'm all in on Peyton Barber this week.
I have some pause about that, especially in cash, just because I can't go with him as the guy. They've admitted in interviews and with what they do on the field that Ronald Jones will get the carries if Ronald Jones is hot. That even if Agumbuwale goes in there and lights it up, he's going to get the carries. So I think as a tournament play at that price, I'm pretty on board with it just because I think that it'll be a pretty low owned play, not super low owned based on what he did last week, but you could hit value on that in a tournament and give yourself some room to play some studs too. So not cash, definitely tournament for me, but I might go somewhere else if it was me.
I mean, in my mind, Peyton Barber is mostly just a jag. I mean, Murph, you and I actually talked about this earlier a little bit because I know you had a couple trades on the table involving that guy. And, as a DFS play, sure. I mean, and he's cheap enough. I mean, especially if you're going to spend up at another position, maybe even your other running back. But, it does concern me if he has, 2 or 3 bad carries in a row and then Ronald Jones breaks off a 13-yarder. Like, does he get the next quarter and a half worth of work? So that's a little terrifying for me. That offense, if it's not, God Chriswin, I'm pretty scared right now.
It's a fair point. All right, let's move into wide receivers. I'm going to start this one off. It is Cole Beasley. I got the Beasles this week, guys. He plays Cincinnati, who has been a pretty middling defense. And I just feel like the Bills are going to light him up. We're going to have the 3-0 Bills and the 3-0 Patriots next week. Just saying. Go Bills.
I actually love Beasley here. I had him. I made an entire DraftKings lineup out of everybody that might be considered a cheap date play. And he ended up being my wide receiver 1. I like him quite a bit. But I like him to the tune of, potentially double-digit catches, but not quite 100 yards. Like, I just don't see him making a ton of plays down the field. He's definitely worth it at 4,400, and he's a guy that will look really good on your roster. I just don't know if Buffalo has enough to really beat up this secondary beyond Beasley.
Yeah, I think John Brown is going to do a good job taking the top off that defense, and he's been running quite a few routes. I like the play. They've given up 10-plus points to 2 receivers in each of the last 2 weeks in Cincinnati, so I think it's a decent play. I don't think there's just a whole lot of upside there. Like, I would be really surprised if Cole Beasley scores 2 touchdowns, but I do think that as a cash play, since DK is PPR, he's a really safe floor guy, and he allows you to spend up on a higher ceiling guy.
Yeah, and I just wonder who's going to be covering him, because it'll end up being William Jackson over John Brown. That's why I think John Brown gets kind of, blanketed, evaporated. Yeah, he'll try and take the top off, but Jackson can run with him. He's no slouch. And it might end up being Darquez Dennard in the slot. And if that's the case, I really like Beasley because he'll shake Dennard. He just doesn't have the hips to move with a guy like Beasley over the middle. And, the only thing I'm worried about is, does he get loose after the catch? Because those 2 safeties in Cincinnati are actually pretty decent. Jesse Bates and Sean Williams, they're no joke. That linebacking group is awful. They're not going to provide any coverage help, but that secondary really is more talented than they get credit for.
All right, Joe, you're up. Who is your cheap date wide receiver this week?
Honestly, I don't think I need to say much about this one. It's Emmanuel Sanders at 4,800. He's criminally underpriced. Last week against one of the best secondaries in football, he absolutely destroyed. And so look at this. His 4X value is 19.2 this week based on his $4,800 salary. He's averaging 5 more points than that. He's averaging 5X on his salary this week. I think it's a fantastic play. And it looks like Joe Flacco pretty much only has eyes for Emmanuel Sanders.
He tore his ACL 2-3 years ago, right? Like, it doesn't feel like he did it last year.
Emmanuel Sanders, it was his Achilles too, which is an even
Achilles,
harder injury to come back from. He looks like he's in midseason form. I'm really surprised, but you got to go with it now.
I love that play. I think Emmanuel Sanders is one of those guys that's just at the end of the year, you're going to be like, well, wait, how did he become a wide receiver 1?
I'm going to have 100% exposure to him this week. If he the bed, like, whatever, I'll move on to next week. Because at 4,800, I don't even care if he's owned in 50% of DK leagues. Like, I'm in.
All right, Jeff, we're back to you. Who is your wide receiver of week 3?
Man, I'm going deep sleeping. We're like in a coma for 2.5 decades, deep sleeping. Give me Dante Pettis. The guy saw the field finally last week. He actually made it in between the white lines. Now, I think Pettis has been getting the slow roll onto the field. He's finding his way out of Shanahan's doghouse. And, they put too much into him in the offseason and wrapping up last season and the preseason this year. He's bound to start getting some looks here against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh really talented on the outsides. I think that if we can get Pettis in the slot and get a few mismatches going, he's the kind of guy that can find open spaces over the middle of the field. And it'll end up being him and Kittle that'll, lead the team to victory against Pittsburgh. Sorry, Steeler Nation.
Is there a world where this groin injury that he had jumping into the season has actually just been limiting him to the point where he's been underutilized because he can't do it and he's getting healthy?
It could be. And, it's always so hard to speculate on these things, right? We can only go by what we see. But the fact is we didn't see anything. He had 0 snaps week 1. And they had, 2 snaps in week 1. My bad. I was rounding down because he didn't make it
2
to 5.
snaps, 1 target, 1 catch.
Yeah. So he basically wasn't on the field. And week 2, he was only a few snaps better, but at least he got onto the field. He saw double-digit snaps at least. I feel like if you're on the field under 10 snaps, it doesn't really count. but I gotta believe that this is going to be the dude in the week that he's finally going to make something happen, because Pittsburgh is not going to be afraid to air it out, especially with their new toy. They have to know if he's the real deal so they can go out and make a trade for another quarterback if he's not. So I fully expect Pittsburgh to come out trying to just fun and gun while Connor's hurt and getting their guy Rudolph, ready to rock and roll.
Pop quiz hot shot. Who had more snaps in week 2? Marquise Goodwin, Deebo Samuel, or Dante Pettis?
More snaps in week 2? Yeah, I feel like it would be Goodwin out of the group. I don't know why. I was going to say, I feel like that was the guy.
Dante Pettis was second, though. Deebo Samuel was actually fourth on the team in snaps.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something else going on there, too. And again, I always try to look for the snaps, and then I try to equate that back to where are we at with targets? Were they quality targets? Like, some snaps are just kind of BS snaps because, they'll have a 3-wide set, but they were, running it. I want to know if the guy's running routes. And I didn't calculate routes for the 49ers this week.
No, I didn't either. And I haven't looked at them on Pro Football Focus, but the usage in that system does lend itself to the idea that nobody has emerged as the number 1 or even probably the number 2, because Marquise Goodwin led the team in snaps with 37, but he only had 51.4% of the total snaps. So we could see an emergence from Pettis going forward. I don't think that this wide receiver core is shaken out.
Yeah, this isn't a guy that I'm telling people to go out and grab off waivers just yet, but I have this just unshakable feeling he'll be a guy come playoff time that you're going to be really thankful is on your roster.
Yeah, I haven't dropped him yet. And I would play him in tournaments as a contrarian play because he's going to be less than 1% owned for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I was going with him here because, you guys know me. I like to play, get me in the Millie Maker, get me in the big money tournaments. I don't play cash usually. I don't do a lot of head-to-head. I want those guys that are going to be the one-off, no one's going to really play them. I need one or two of those guys to help differentiate my lineup.
I like it.
All right, let's move into tight ends. I will start us off here. My tight end sheet day this week is old man Jason Witten, man. They're playing Miami. That should speak for itself. And right now, Miami is second in points allowed to tight ends. I got these stats off the FF Toolbox from FulltimeFantasy.com. Shout out to the network. Right now, they are allowing 21.4 points per game to tight ends. Joe, in a second here, will get into the number 1 team, but just feels like a good play this week. They're looking for him in the red zone. He scored 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks. I feel like you could go worse than Jason Witten. I feel like this is a kind of a safe play.
I think at his price point, he'll probably be a pretty highly owned player, but I like the play. I think he's got a real good chance to score a touchdown.
Well, I like anybody who's playing against Miami.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
At any position.
Yeah, any position. I don't care what it is. I will take any players going against the Dolphins because they are so universally bad across every position. I can't even believe it. I feel like this Dolphin team might be worse than the 0-16 Lions team we saw.
At this point, they certainly are. Yeah, they might improve. They might gel a little bit, but right now they look like maybe the worst team ever to play football.
Yeah,
in the NFL.
People, including myself, have dogged out Dave Gettleman for not having much of a plan. I'm really concerned about the Dolphins' plan right now.
You know that they don't have a real good plan and don't do a whole lot of research when they start hiring Patriots assistants as their head coach.
Oh, yeah. All right, Jeff, you are up. Who is your tight end this week?
I'm going TJ Hawkinson. I love this guy. And, I'm not a University of Iowa guy. I actually despise that school more than almost anything else in life. But, man, TJ Hawkinson looks like the real deal. And I'm just looking at a situation right now where for 3,500, it's almost a punt at the tight end position. You're running them against the Eagles. They don't seem like they can cover anybody. And Hawk right now is averaging 15 points a game. I mean, as a rookie tight end, I will absolutely take that. And I'll play the idea that in Philly, that whole team is yet to figure it out defensively. And the Lions actually figure out how to score.
Yeah, Vernon Davis had 16 points, not in DK, just in regular PPR in week 1. So this is a high upside play for sure. Because Hawkinson at this point in their careers is definitely the more talented of those two players.
No, and he's definitely more complete. It's if he's on the field, he might be blocking, and that's legitimate, or he might actually be running a seam route, or he could be just running that little quick out on you. He can do a little bit of everything, is what makes him so dangerous. And so very, very excited about him. I think he's going to be a really good player for a long time.
All right, Joe, finish us off here at tight ends. Who is your tight end sheep date?
We talked about him a little bit earlier. I like Greg Olsen. He's the same price at 3,700 as Jason Witten. And this is all about the matchup, man. Like, they are just absolutely getting crushed by the tight end position. Vance Joseph defenses always have. Like, the Cardinals hired a guy that always gives up points to the tight end position. Look at what they did in the first 2 weeks. Mark Andrews in week 2, 28.2 points. TJ Hawkinson in week 1, 28.1. Now, I don't think Greg Olsen is probably going to play enough snaps or get enough targets with a backup quarterback to see borderline 30-point performance. But I do think that we could very easily see him hit that 15 points that he needs for 4x value. If he scores 1 touchdown and he's had 9 targets in each of the last 2 weeks. If he gets 9 targets, catches 5 of them, scores a touchdown, he's destroyed 4x value.
Now, I'm just assuming here that if Olsen ends up being, say, out for some reason, you're just going to insert Ian Thomas here?
Boom.
Because I would. And that's an even better play because what's Ian Thomas, like $3,000?
I doubt it. He might even be less than that.
Might be 2,800 maybe. I got to look him up now. Let's find out.
Ian Thomas is 2,600. That would be the absolute perfect punt play. I would do that in almost all of my lineups because it's a total punt play. Like, to get 4x, you need less than 12 points. Yeah, I'm doing it.
So we're actually, as much as we all love Greg Olsen, and we do, we're kind of hoping he's out to get that play on Ian Thomas.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, though. I think this is like more maintenance related than injury related.
Yeah, it could be, but at his age, you never really know.
Could act up tomorrow.
Exactly.
I think I'm the same age as him, and my back goes out on me all the time. So.
Oh yeah, mine's sore just sitting here. I keep looking around trying to find my pain meds.
Oh, you old men. All right, let's move into defenses. Finish this out here. Jeff, what is your defense this week?
You know, what's funny here is, Murph, you and I had picked the same defense initially, so I had to switch gears. And I'm going to take the Bengals. I'm going to go the 2,400 basically punt play route here. My thought is that they are going to try and force the ball down to John Brown at some point, and it's going to be William Jackson showing up with a pick. And I just think Josh Allen makes enough bad throws that maybe 1 or 2 of them end up in the hands of the Bengals. I don't think they'll get any sacks. I don't really see a lot of that. But it could be a relatively low-scoring affair, which might help boost that value a little bit.
Yeah, you don't even need 10 points to get 4x value on that. So even if you're punting it and you're only needing 2.5x, like, just don't give up 20 points.
Right. And that's where it just seemed like a really safe play for me.
All right, Joe, give me your defense.
My defense is playing my tight end. I probably wouldn't play them together just because it would limit your upside a little bit, but I like the Cardinals defense at 2,700. Carolina is going to have a backup quarterback throwing the football. That's always a recipe for success. I think that this is probably going to be a higher owned defense. It's not going to be up there at the top, but I like the play. They only need 10 points to hit value. Like, basically, if they score a touchdown, they destroy value, and just a couple of turnovers will get it for them.
All right, guys, I will finish this up here. My defense this week is the Bucs defense. They have been surprisingly solid through 2 weeks, and they're playing the Giants. As much as we want the Daniel Jones to be awesome storyline to happen, there's a chance where it's a low-scoring affair for the Giants. He's kind of getting his feel out there, and Tampa Bay limits him. So I feel like this is a pretty safe play as far as defenses. And like Jeff said, he was on him too. It's a good play. I like Tampa Bay this week.
Yep, they were on my list as well.
Yeah, there's rookie quarterbacks, always a 50-50 proposition. You know, considering the price, I'm willing to throw a lineup or 2 out there with Jones and maybe do a different lineup or 2 with Tampa Bay's defense just to kind of hedge, because there's enough decent quarterbacks, as we've already outlined, that you can get on the cheap. Same thing with defenses.
All right, that'll do it for our cheap dates. We are almost done with this episode, but before we get out of here, it is time for our weekly thing, What to Watch For.
What to watch for.
Well, it's time. The Daniel Jones era has begun, and I'm going to be glued to Fox in the afternoon slate to see what the kid can do against a surprisingly efficient Buccaneers defense, just mentioned. Jones was first in almost every major category in the preseason for all passers, and if he can continue that, everyone in this offense might get a boost. Give me all of the Evan Ingram this week. Dude is going to smash.
For me, it's not just one game. I'm keeping tabs on all the new quarterbacks. It's hard to say at this moment how all these new guys are going to impact their subsequent wide receiver, running backs, and tight ends. I'm more than a little nervous right now on the impact of guys like Juju, Mike Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Evan Ingram, and a few others. I'd love to have all those nerves calmed by a few of these guys, namely Daniel Jones and Mason Rudolph.
1, 2, 3. All right, for me, the first thing is Joe's watching one side of the Giants game, and I'm going to stick to the other side. The Bucs, like we've mentioned, have been surprisingly solid so far this season, overcoming a rough start in week 1 to win their divisional matchup in week 2. In a division where Drew Brees is coming back in week 8 or 9 and Cam Newton is out for the moment, they could really be a surprise team when the playoff picture comes into focus. Will Arians' influence continue to calm Winston? He looked pretty good last week. Will Barber take the lead back role officially? I think so. We've debated that on the show. This game is going to be a fun one to watch if you aren't a Giants fan, at least. Joe, you had a fun Tampa Bay defensive stat this morning. Can you share it with our listeners real quick?
Yeah, Tampa Bay is the most efficient defense against the run so far, and they're basically middle of the road against the pass. They're definitely not the dumpster fire we thought. They're 4th overall in defensive DVOA on footballoutsiders.com.
The second thing I'm looking for this week is going to be the trade targets. Guys like Kenyon Drake and Jalen Ramsey have had their names bandied about. How many snaps are they really going to get? Specifically Kenyon Drake. Is he going to see some touches? Is he going to see a lot of touches? What are they going to look like? This is likely the last time the Dolphins and Jags will both get to audition these two guys to get max trade value. I really want to see where they go or if they end up just getting stuck where they are.
All right, my second thing, the Broncos at Packers, Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Call me crazy, but the Broncos offense looked a little better last week. I'm hoping they continue to improve with Wacko Flacco at the helm. Against a Packers team looking to put points on the board, can we pull out a win this week? Maybe LaFleur can help us out a little bit before the yelling starts.
1, 2, 3. Ravens at Chiefs on CBS at 1 Eastern has the highest over-under on the slate at 55. Shockingly, the Chiefs are the toughest defensive matchup for Baltimore in 2019 so far. Can Lamar Jackson continue this ridiculous pace? Will we get the shootout everyone expects? Is this game fantasy gold or fool's gold? I'm investing pretty heavily for DFS, so I can't wait to find out.
All right, and that will do it. Our week 3 prep show is in the books. Jeff, Joe, I'm excited to watch week 19 of the season.
Week 27 in terms of quarterback injuries. We're going in dog years, basically.
That's what I was going to say. It's definitely dog years this season, man. It's actually really stressful. Like, we don't have a lot of wide receiver injuries, and it feels like we don't have many running back injuries. But man, watching quarterbacks go down, oof, that's probably more stressful.
And you know what? Backups get all excited about maybe getting their role increased, but then they watch Trevor Siemian last week and they're like, "Oh God, no!"
Yeah, now you get Luke Falk. I mean, what the Falk is that?
Stop.
I'm going to go sit in my corner now. Thank you.
You should.
All right, guys, we'll be back on Tuesday with our week 3 review or our week 27 review. We'll see how many injuries happen. For Joe at Human Stat Sheet on Twitter, for Jeff at NFL_DiMatteo, and of course myself at MurphyFFT, or find us all in the NFL Fantasy Football Discussion Group on Facebook. See you later, guys. Bye.
Later.
Stay healthy, San Diego.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.